Always fun to talk boxing with Doug Fischer, one of the editors at The Ring TV. He joined me to talk about Saturday's major card on HBO, Vitaly Klitschko against Char. We talk Molina against Demarco, and we talk Ward and Dawson. We also talk, in general, some boxing of what are the weight divisions that could be the cash cows. It's Doug Fischer talking boxing from The Ring TV on the Sports Buffet podcast. If you want the best in boxing, you got to go to Ring TV. Doug Fischer, one of the editors for the outstanding publication on the internet, and joins me here on the Sports Buffet podcast. And Doug, we got a lot of big fights coming up this weekend, so let's look at them one by one. First, we've got a fight overseas that'll be replayed on HBO tomorrow night with Vitaly Klitschko and Char. Is this a legitimate threat to Klitschko?
No, I don't think so, and I think Klitschko picked Char because it was an easy defense of his WBC title, and I think I've heard that Vitaly is looking at getting back into the political arena in his native Ukraine, and if things are looking good as far as his prospects for political office, he's going to call it a day really soon. And so I just think he's holding on to the WBC title for his brother, his younger brother, the Ring Magazine recognized heavyweight champion of the world, who also holds the WBA and the IBF and the WBO heavyweight belts. He has no plans of retiring, and I know he wants that WBC belt. He's greedy; he wants them all. And, so his brother doesn't want to risk losing that WBC title and having it leave the Klitschko family and K2 Promotions, which is their promotional company. So he's just, if he, the Saturday's fight is just a title defense that he knows he's going to win. And I would be shocked if Char is competitive with Vitaly Klitschko. I really would. I don't know much about Char.
Is there even a risk out there for Klitschko, though?
Is there what?
Is there even a risk out there for Vitaly to fight?
I guess, we can't go, all of us, we can't go forever.
Right.
At some point, he has to look, he has to get old. I think he has actually slowed down a little bit. He suffered an arm injury in his last fight earlier this year against Derek Chisora. And he was his usual methodical and effective self, but he usually stops the guy, and he wasn't able to stop Chisora, who was knocked out in 5 or 6 rounds by David Hay a few months ago. And I understand he had he only had one good arm, but it looked like he slowed down a bit. Kind of like a lot of our other older elite fighters. I think Sergio Martinez has slowed down a tad. I think Pacquiao has slowed down a little bit. I think even Floyd Mayweather is beginning to show signs of aging. And the other fighters I mentioned are in their 30s, and Vitaly Klitschko has entered his 40s. So there is the danger of father time. But beyond just getting old overnight and suffering some sort of debilitating injury during the fight, I can't see Char winning this.
But there's nothing out there for Vitaly that's threatening other than father time. Is that accurate to say?
Well, no, I don't think that's completely accurate. I think he slowed down enough to where some of the top heavyweight contenders might be able to, if they have a good night and he has a bad night, they might be able to pull pull off the upset without Klitschko suffering some kind of rotator cuff tear, or throw his hip out or something crazy like that, or break his hand completely, break both his hands. No, I think there's guys that can give him a good fight. I really do, because I don't think he's fighting at the form that he was fighting at, say, 3 years ago when he beat up Chris Arreola right here in Los Angeles. I think he has. I think he is getting old. I think he knows that. I think also his focus is not 100% on boxing, and no matter how good a fighter is, even if he's in his athletic prime, once he starts to look at other things, and Vitaly Klitschko is definitely looking at other things, other parts of his life, I think they're vulnerable. So I don't think he's unbeatable. I'll put it that way.
the second fight on HBO is Doug Fischer joins us here on the Sports Buffet podcast, breaking down what you're going to be seeing this weekend. The second fight is a pretty good one on paper to some. John Molina, who really, I believe, was it him or was it Carlos that got robbed against Kirkland?
Yeah, Carlos Molina was the guy who had that horrible DQ loss against James Kirkland earlier this year in Texas. Now, John Molina is a Southern California lightweight contender. He's a guy who did not have much of an amateur boxing background. I think he maybe had 30 amateur bouts, all of them local level. He wasn't really boxing when he was in high school. He was a standout wrestler in the area that he's from. He's from Covina, California, and he's a big lightweight. He could easily fight at 140 pounds. He's physically strong. He's very durable. He's not very skilled. He does not have good technique. But what he does possess that makes him a threat against any lightweight is one-punch knockout power. He's got power in his right hand and his left hand. And he's the kind of guy who he doesn't go away. He'll take punishment. And he proved that in his fight against Henry Lundy. Lundy was outclassing Molina for 8 rounds. It was just not just winning the bout, but having fun in there, sort of humiliating Molina. Maybe Lundy got a little bit greedy and wanted to really heap some punishment on Molina, and he got rocked badly. And Molina got into the fight and finally stopped Lundy, I believe, in the 10th round of a really exciting ESPN televised fight. That was a Friday Night Fights main event a couple of years ago. And as long as a fighter, anybody, pretty much any guy who could box, particularly a fighter as classy and technically sound as Antono Demarco, they can out-jab Molina, they can out-box Molina as long as they give him respect and not try to get into his personal space, so to speak. But from what I know of Demarco, he's a tall, rangy southpaw technician, and he boxes early. But what he likes to do in all of his fights is gradually, maybe starting from the 5th or 6th round, the midway point of the fight, he likes to gradually break his opponents down and walk them down by the end of the fight. And I think anybody who walks to John Molina is in danger of getting knocked out. So I favor DeMarco in this contest, but I think Molina is a very live dog, and I can see him winning by a knockout victory if DeMarco tries to press him down the stretch of the fight.
I guess what I proved is we do need a scorecard to tell all of our Molinas apart.
There's a lot of Molinas out there. There's more than one Carlos Molina. The Carlos Molina who was DQ'd is a middleweight contender, but there's also a Carlos Molina from out here in Southern California who fights at lightweight and junior lightweight, and he's an unbeaten prospect. So it gets confusing. You're not the only one who gets confused in those Molina guys.
Well, I'm probably one of the people in the world that gets confused most often, but probably not just about Molinas. So anyway, moving on, Doug Fischer of Ring TV, so gracious to join us here on the Sports Buffet podcast. Main event tomorrow night on HBO's World Championship Boxing, which a lot of people are looking forward to. It's Ward and Dawson. We kind of touched on it briefly a couple weeks ago. You know, it might not be Castillo Corrales or Gotti Warder, but this could be for those technical freaks out there. This could be something to maybe cherish.
It's not for everybody, but I'll say this: if you are purist, if you're somebody who really likes to see skill and technique, and more importantly, two smart guys who they're competing on a mental level. They're competing for control of distance, control of the bout's tempo. They're maneuvering around for position to get the right shots off. If you like that kind of stuff, if you like a chess match, basically, this fight is probably for you. I'm hoping that it's more than a chess match because the stakes are really high. Because Andre Ward is the undisputed super middleweight champion of the world. It's not just Ring Magazine who recognizes him. Everybody recognizes him as the man at super middleweight, and he's fighting the best light heavyweight, the Ring Magazine and WBC light heavyweight champion of the world, Chad Dawson, who's stepping down in weight. It's a lot of significance to this bout. The winner is definitely a pound-for-pound level fighter. Andre Ward is already, I believe, ranked number 5 in the ring, and most people kind of have him top 5 or near the top 5 of their pound-for-pound list. So, Ward is definitely viewed as an elite fighter, and Chad Dawson used to be viewed as an elite fighter, and he certainly can be again if he wins this fight. And the thing is, when our elite fighters fight, we like to have an elite-level contest. So I'm hoping we get that, although, when people ask me for my official pick from this fight, having watched both guys fight many times live, and Ward in particular, I'm getting images of Ward's breakthrough fight against Mikkel Kessler, who was a tall, rangy boxer who relied on his jab, and Alan Green, who was an athletic, talented sort of boxer-puncher that Andre Ward mugged for 12 rounds and shut out in Oakland, where this fight is taking place. So I can see, I think Andre Ward is going to do whatever he has to do to neutralize Chad Dawson, and if neutralizing Chad Dawson comes from smothering him, getting inside, and kind of grappling a bit, I think Andre Ward's going to do that. And if that does happen, I just hope the bout doesn't become an ugly bout or terribly one-sided or boring. That's the worst thing. I don't want people to tune in to HBO and watch this great lightweight fight, and then main event's here, and it's a dud. I'm gonna be open-minded and optimistic and say that the fight will probably settle into a chess match mode after some intense early rounds, but I'm hopeful that it's going to be an entertaining boxing contest where both guys have their moments until the final bell.
Are you surprised this fight is happening? 1, and number 2, who has more to lose off this with a loss? I would think Andre Ward.
I think Andre Ward, because Dawson is leaving his comfort zone. He's leaving his division. He's coming. See, Dawson made all the concessions. Dawson wanted to, at first, he wanted to see if Andre Ward would step up to light heavyweight. I actually think Andre Ward could fight comfortably at 175 pounds. But Ward and his people said, no way. You're coming down to 168, and I'm going to be defending my titles. And the fight is also taking place in Andre Ward's backyard, his hometown. Oakland. They're fighting in Oakland. So, all of the advantages are going to Andre Ward. So now it's up to him to take advantage of his advantages. And if Chad Dawson loses, he's still the recognized light heavyweight champion of the world. His light heavyweight titles are not on the line in this belt. Andre Ward is not pulling a Sugar Ray Leonard. If you remember back in 1988, I believe, Sugar Ray Leonard fought. He went up in weight to the super middleweight division, and he fought then reigning WBC light heavyweight title holder Donnie Lalonde, and he knocked Lalonde out in 9 rounds, and he won Lalonde's light heavyweight belt, even though the fight took place at super middleweight, and the newly created WBC super middleweight title was also on the line. So Sugar Ray Leonard won 2 title belts with 1 fight. This is not going to be the case with Saturday's fight with Ward and Dawson.
At what point does Ward really have to get out of Oakland? I didn't mean to cut you off, but at what point does he really need to because most of his big fights have been in the Bay Area.
Right, except for the Carl Froch fight, which was in Atlantic City. Well, Ward wants to fight a big fight in Las Vegas. And I think you asked me a little bit earlier if I was surprised this fight is happening. And I'm not surprised because both guys, both Chad and Andre, want big fights. They want significant fights. They want big HBO bouts. And in their respective division, there's nobody else. Andre Ward faced all the best fighters at super middleweight during the Super 6 World Boxing Classic super middleweight tournament. The only guy that he didn't fight and dominate was Lucien Bute, but Bute was recently knocked out by Carl Froch, who I thought Ward dominated this past December. It was close on 2 scorecards, but most people saw Andre Ward winning at least 9 rounds in that contest. So Ward's kind of proven himself to be the man at super middleweight, so there really wasn't anybody who could make for a significant B-side for Andre Ward. So Chad Dawson filled that void, and Chad Dawson really didn't have any standout players at light heavyweight. There's some tough guys. There's guys like Tavoris Cloud, who was kind of exposed earlier this year against Gabriel Campillo. There's Campillo, who's still not really a name in the U.S., but a very difficult fighter. There's Vibut Shumanov, who's an unbeaten guy from Kazakhstan, who's he's got the WBA title. So there's guys like this, and maybe the guy with the biggest name at light heavyweight was Jean Pascal, who has a technical decision victory over Chad Dawson. And I'm sure that fight will happen eventually, that rematch between Dawson and Pascal. But I think for right now, this year, the biggest fight that could be made in either Dawson or Andre Ward's career was a fight against each other.
Could Andre Ward, I'll view Andre Ward at first because I think he probably wins the fight tomorrow night. I could be wrong, but what's next for Andre Ward if he gets past it? Could he face maybe the winner of Chavez Jr. and Martinez?
I don't see it happening. I think that's a fight that fight fans would like to see. If Chavez Jr. beats Sergio Martinez on September 15th, he's probably going to do it by imposing that incredible size on of Martinez and showing that amazing durability and that great chin that he inherited from his pops. And that's going to beg the question: is this guy even a middleweight anymore? And if Chavez Jr. beats Sergio Martinez, who else is there for him to fight at middleweight that makes for a huge fight? Now, a lot of hardcore fans are excited about Gennady Golovkin.
Right.
Golovkin's a monster, and he hasn't established himself on the U.S. scene yet. I know Chavez's people aren't going to want that. So, I mean, I think a lot of fans are going to, hardcore fans especially, they're going to say, hey, if you're not going to fight Gennady Golovkin, and you're not going to fight this guy Daniel Gill, who holds the IBF and the WBA titles, he's a really good Australian fighter, they're going to clamor for him to go up and weight. They're going to fight people your own size and fight somebody like an Andre Ward. But I don't think, I think Chavez's people, I think Bob Arum, his promoter, they're much too shrewd. I think they know that, Ward he has too much talent, too much skill, and Chavez Jr. would give up the one advantage he has over everybody he fights at middleweight, which is size. And this question has been posed to Chavez Jr. if he's looking at going up to super middleweight, and he says no, he can still make 160. And he's going to fight at middleweight for as long as he can make 160 pounds. So I don't see Jr. going up in weight, and I don't see Sergio Martinez, who claims he can still make junior middleweight. He says he's even willing to come down to 150 pounds to get a fight with Floyd Mayweather. So he's not looking big. And his promoter, Lou DiBella, and his manager, Samson Lukowicz, they've gone on record many times and said Sergio Martinez is not a super middleweight, and he's not going to go up to 168 pounds. So Ward's going to have a problem finding dance partners. I'm thinking what he might have to do is continue to entice some of the better light heavyweight fighters down to the super middleweight division, or he's going to need to go up to light heavyweight. And having seen him box many times, having seen him just walking around between fights, I don't think he can carry 175 pounds. And a fact that people forget about is when he won the gold medal in the 2004 Olympic Games, he fought at light heavyweight. He was fighting in the 178-pound division. So it's not like he's unfamiliar with light heavyweight. I definitely think, at least within 2 years, Andre Ward is going to be campaigning full-time at light heavyweight.
Finishing up a little bit with Doug Fischer, just some general boxing now. I watched the HBO card last week, and it's really starting to get on my nerves of these guys missing weight, and not by just 1 or 2 pounds, but a lot.
Horrible.
A lot.
Horrible.
What can be done about that?
It's becoming an epidemic. I think the only way this ceases to happen is the people in charge. And I'm talking about the commissions. I'm talking about the promoters and managers who represent the fighters. They need to treat boxing as a sport and not a business. And one thing HBO showed immediately after informing us that Jonathan Gonzalez had missed weight by a mile is they showed this negotiation process between Sergey Zinzerik's promoter, Artie Palulo, and the people who represent Gonzalez. And they worked out a second weigh-in, and they say, okay, if you make this or whatever, and that's the problem. See, the people in boxing are happy to get that extra money, the fine that the commission levies against the boxer who misses weight, and then they're so desperate for that HBO exposure, that television exposure, that they go through with these fights. But we got to remember that these guys are putting themselves at risk.
Right.
When they step into somebody who failed to make weight, and it's obvious that they didn't try to make the weight. They're not drained. They're not shut down at the. It's not like the guy who made weight is fighting a weight-drained fighter. You know what I'm saying? These guys are like Adrian Broner against Vicente Escobedo, and now Gonzalez against Zinzerik. They're missing weight, and they're looking comfortable. They're like, yeah, whatever. And at least Broner was cut. Gonzalez was looking paunchy.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't happen. So I think two things need to happen. The first thing is that these guys need to be fined way more money. The commissions need to take half their purse. Once you take their money, that's affecting their livelihood. But, oh, wait a minute. I don't care if this is on Showtime or HBO. I gotta pay bills back home.
Right.
I still gotta pay my trainer, and my manager has to take his cut. There were training expenses. If you take half my money or 60% of my purse, I'm not going to be able to do that and have any money left. So that's going to threaten them right there. That will entice them to do those extra miles of road work that they're missing, or to push away from the dinner table, or to cut out those midnight snacks. And the other thing is the people who represent the fighters who actually are professional and make weight, they need to draw a line in the sand. They need to say, no, forget this. We had a bout that was contracted for the junior middleweight division. This guy has come in as a super middleweight. This will not stand. We're not doing it. Forget it. The fight's off. And people will be disappointed, and networks will be angry, and I'm sure the networks will threaten the fighters that stand on principle and refuse to fight. But they're also going to be left without programming, and I think that in that way the networks will crack down on the people who caused this situation, and the people who are at fault are the fighters and the people around them who allowed them to weigh in so heavy.
I did think the main event, though, was very impressive on two fronts because I'm going to call him G Squared. G Squared was just a freaking buzzsaw. And then the guy that he was fighting, the guy from Poland, I mean, I'll give him credit. He kept getting up.
He made it a fight.
He
was outclassed, and he was overpowered from the get-go, but he made it a fight because of his defiance. And if that referee hadn't have stopped him, he would have kept getting up. I mean, you like to see that. That's the kind of spirit that, the old-timers had. Joe Frazier against George Foreman in that first fight. I mean, the fight was over once he got hurt by Big George, and after that first knockdown, his equilibrium was off. He didn't have his legs, and it didn't matter. I mean, he was never going to beat. He could fight George Foreman 100 times. He was going to lose by knockout 100 times. But Frazier didn't care. He's the kind of fighter who goes out on a shield. They're like Archie Moore against Rocky Marciano.
Right.
His trainers tried to stop that fight between rounds. First of all, you're old. You're not a real heavyweight. And Marciano's beating the crap out of you. Let's pull the plug right here. And Archie Moore ordered his seconds. No, if I lose, it has to be by a real knockout. I've got to go down on that canvas. That's the only way I can keep my dignity. That's the way I keep my pride. I have a fighter's pride and a champion's pride that is such that I'm really going to go out on my shield. And that's what Coxa did. And I tip my hat to him because we didn't have. I mean, it was a blowout on HBO, but it was a compelling blowout. He made it a fight for as long as it lasted. And now that he's earned respect among American fans, and Golovkin has a very strong buzz now among American hardcore fans that his promoter, K2 Promotions, the Klitschko Brothers promotional company, and HBO can build into something really significant if they play their cards right.
Two final questions. With Golovkin, did we see the new Sergio Martinez in the fact of he might be one of the better and most action-packed fighters out there, but I mean, realistically, and I mean this with all the love in the world, he is not getting a big fight because A, does not have a name, and C, I can't see anybody with a O next to their name. I'm not going to mention any names. Somebody like Floyd Mayweather, they're not going to want to touch him.
Mayweather will never fight him. I don't think Andre Ward will fight him. And Andre Ward doesn't have to fight him. I mean, Golovkin has to solidify himself as the man at middleweight before he starts looking up to super middleweight and challenging Ward. The only way I could see Ward and Golovkin fighting is if everybody avoids Ward at 168 and 175, and everybody continues to avoid Gennady Golovkin at 160, then maybe they do some business, you know what I mean?
But what about Sergio? What about Sergio and Golovkin?
I think Sergio would fight him. I don't think Sergio's management and promoter would be thrilled about that fight. But if Golovkin continues to win, I don't think Golovkin would be Sergio Martinez's first choice of a title defense after the Chavez fight. I think they tried to make him a star in their own right and bring in guys that he can beat and that they can keep the Sergio train going. However, there are a lot of hungry young middleweights out there who aren't going to be afraid to fight Golovkin because they've made no money and they have no name. And I'm talking about guys like Kid Chocolate, who's undefeated, who's fighting an undefeated belt holder on October 20th on Showtime. So watch that and see if Kid Chocolate can sort of emerge as a real player in the middleweight division. And there's Daniel Gill, who holds two of the major titles, the WBA belt and the IBF belt. And I thought he was sensational in earning a hard-earned, hard-fought split decision over long-reigning title holder Felix Sturm in Germany, which is almost impossible to beat Felix Sturm on points in Germany. And Daniel Gill did just that, and I thought the right man won that fight, even though it was a hotly contested middleweight title bout. And Gill, he's Australian, and he's got a lot of heart, he's got a lot of pride. He might be willing to put those two titles on the line against Golovkin. Maybe not in his next fight, but maybe 2 or 3 fights down the line. So I think internationally speaking, there's a lot of guys out there for Golovkin to fight. And there's even some of Sergio Martinez's leftovers like Matthew Macklin and Darren Barker, who I think would make for interesting middleweight contests against Gennady Golovkin. I mean, we know he can punch. We know he's a methodical sort of grinder who wears his guys down, who likes to get them up against the ropes and break them down with a body attack, kind of like Julio Cesar Chavez Sr. But we haven't seen him against Harry Style in the middleweight division. And I'd like to see, I'm a big believer of Golovkin. I've been high on this guy for a few years now. I'd like to see him in against some guys of different heights and physical builds and styles and strengths. I'd like to see how he imposes that style on different middleweight contenders. And I think there's enough guys out there who are not big stars who want to fight on HBO. If they fought on HBO once, like Barker and Macklin, they want to do it again. And if they've never fought on HBO, like Daniel Gill, they want to do that. Maybe they want to come over to America and try to make their name the way Golovkin is starting to do now.
Final question, Doug. Always appreciate the time. Hopefully we can get together before next week to preview what is an absolute gigantic weekend next weekend. But let's we talked about Chavez, we talked about Ward, we talked about all these guys. With the exception of maybe welterweight or junior middleweight, whatever you want to call it now, what is a true money weight class that these guys could fight in to where they're going to get paid? Because Chavez and Ward and people like that, they ain't going to fight for free.
Yeah, I think junior middleweight is really going to become a cash division because Mayweather is like we said at the start of the interview, he's getting along in the tooth. He's an elite fighter. He's either number 1 or number 2 pound for pound in everybody's mind. And, he had some trouble with Miguel Cotto. And he wasn't expected to. That was supposed to be an easy fight. That was supposed to be a fight that he won by knockout. And he wasn't able to do that. And, he told the HBO commentators, well, I just wanted to make an interesting fight. I wanted to put on an exciting fight for the fans. That's bullshit. He had more than he could handle with Cotto, and maybe he's not as dominant at 154 as he was at 147, and that's cause for excitement because there are B-sides for him at junior middleweight. And I think Saul Alvarez, if Canelo defends the WBC junior middleweight title against José Lopez, which he's favored to do on September 15th, I think Alvarez, who's a Mexican star, and Cotto, who is a Puerto Rican star, they can make for a huge, they can make for a mega fight. They can make for a huge pay-per-view event that's going to tap in to those giant boxing markets, Puerto Rican and Mexican, but also all hardcore fans. You know,
right.
If you're a fan of boxing, you know who Cotto is, and you've begun to hear about Alvarez, and he's begun to prove himself. So these are fights that can be made. I think there's kind of like a round robin that can be made between Mayweather and Cotto and Alvarez, and there's a lot of strong supporting players like James Kirkland. Alfredo Angulo is finally out of detainment and getting his career back on track. So I think there's a lot of players at junior middleweight. Two guys I didn't mention who are supposed to fight each other in a WBC title elimination bout is undefeated Vanes Martirosyan. And there's Erislandy Lara, once beaten, but that one loss is very controversial against Paul Williams. Lara's from Cuba, one of the better Cuban amateur standouts who's turned pro, and he's been successful so far in the professional ranks. So there's a lot of sort of supporting players, and there's three guys you can call stars, and when you have one division, there's like three guys who are ticket sellers and do good ratings, where you have Mayweather, Cotto, and Alvarez. That's a very strong division.
Doug, as always, appreciate it. I'm already counting down till we can do it again. Always appreciate the time.
Hey, thanks, Bob.